Hey guys, it's Elise and welcome back to my cupcake addiction. A little while ago I shared with you guys my ultimate dark chocolate mud cake recipe. That one's utterly delicious and you guys have loved it, but I thought for those of you that aren't so keen on dark chocolate, today I'm going to share my white chocolate mud cake recipe. This is a great alternative to a sponge cake or a vanilla cake because not only is it absolutely delicious and tastes like white chocolate, but it's also one that you can bake on a Monday and not eat till a Saturday. With a mud cake, you've always got a little bit longer to eat it. They kind of have a longer shelf life and they're fabulous if you want to carve them, stack them, fondant cover them because they'll bear a little bit more weight than a traditional sponge. The things that you'll need to make your delicious white chocolate mud cake, I've got some white chocolate, of course. I've also got some eggs. I'm using extra large eggs today. I've got some sugar, either a superfine or a caster sugar, so a nice fine grain is best. I'm using some flour. I'm using self-raising, but I'm going to leave conversions down below if you're going to use plain flour with baking powder. I've also got a little bit of tap water. I've got some butter. I'm going to use a salted butter today. If you want to use unsalted butter, absolutely feel free, but you'll need to add a pinch of salt to this recipe. I've got some pure vanilla extract, a little bit of vegetable oil, and I'm going to top my cake today with my whipped white chocolate ganache. This is one of my favorite frostings. It tastes like airy, fluffy, pretty much whipped white chocolate. It's to die for. I'm going to leave all of your conversions, quantities, measurements, everything you need on the mycupcakeaddiction.com website. You'll also need a cake tin. I'm using a 6-inch because I'm going to make mine quite tall today. So I'm going to make two 6 inches, but this is also the perfect size for a 9-inch round. You'll need a saucepan and a little bit of heat, and I've got an offset spatula and a wooden spoon. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use some heat and a saucepan, and we're going to melt together and bring to the boil our butter and our water. You really want that to be at a nice rapid boil, not a soft boil, because we're relying on the heat from this to actually melt all of our white chocolate after we take it off the heat. I'm pretty happy with that as a nice rapid boil. Take it straight off the heat and then immediately pour in all of your white chocolate, being careful not to splash yourself, and stir it around until it's completely melted. It's probably going to take about 5 minutes to fully melt. With your white chocolate now melted completely through your butter and water mixture, you want to take your sugar and also your flour, and we're going to take them through a sifter so they're nice and fine, and we can add as much air as possible to our mix. Now you can also take your eggs and your oil and your vanilla, and we're going to whisk the three of them together. Beautiful. I'm going to make sure that my flour and my sugar are really, really well stirred together. I'm going to dig a little well out of the center. In goes our white chocolate mixture and our egg and oil mixture. And then we mix it all about until it's really nicely combined and you can't see any more little lumps or bumps in there. Now I'm hand mixing this rather than actually beating it with an electric mixer. I'm doing this because beating it with an electric mixer is going to be a bit too tough on it and you're going to end up with a really firm, tough cake. Perfect. All right, that's looking gorgeous and smooth. So now we're going to pour it into our 6-inch pan. I always grease mine and I line it with baking paper when I'm making a mud cake. And you'll also notice that my baking paper, it extends up almost double the height of my baking tin. This is so that my mud cake can rise up above the level of my tin if I want it to. We're gonna bake that cake 160 degrees Celsius for around an hour to an hour and 20 minutes. I'm gonna leave your Fahrenheit conversions down below, but low and slow is the key to a good mud cake. You'll know your mud cake's done when you can insert a skewer into the center of the cake and it comes out with no cake batter on it. Once your mud cake comes out of the oven, you want to let it sit in the tin for at least 15 minutes. You should be able to just grab the top sections of that baking paper, lift the cake out of the tin, and then you can peel away the baking paper on the bottom and on the sides and rest it on a cooling rack until it's completely cool. Don't be alarmed when your mud cake comes out of the oven if it's looking a little bit overcooked or a little bit crispy and brown on top. This is very, very common for a mud cake. We've got a lot of rich ingredients in there and it's spent a long time in the oven, but I assure you, when we cut into this and we shave away those crispy edges, you have moist, dense mud cake deliciousness. So I'm going to use a serrated edge knife and I'm just going to come firstly around the outside edges of my mud cake and I'm going to finally shave off any of those light brown kind of crispy edges. You can see I'm only shaving off really thin sort of pieces at a time. Once all of your little outside edges have been carved away, I'm going to take off the slightly brown base and once again, only a really small amount of cake, just cutting off just really thinly any of those darker brown sections. Lovely. And then we're going to do the same to the top. And these ones will sink just a little bit in the center. So it's up to you if you want to carve that away or if you just want to use that as a little spot in the cake that gets a touch more chocolate ganache than anywhere else. Beautiful. Now I'm going to do this by eye, but if you have a cake leveler, you can definitely use a cake leveler. I'm going to divide mine perfectly in two. To do this, I normally just line it up and I make a very, very shallow cut all the way around the outside edge until I meet up with that first cut. That gives me like a guideline, and then I can go in and cut a little bit deeper, coming in about halfway, and then finishing it off with just a nice big deep cut right through the middle, and you should have 2 white chocolate pieces of mud cake. Because we've got 2 cakes, we're going to do that twice. With our cakes all carved, I'm going to take a little bit of that whipped white ganache, place it down onto a cake plate or a cake board, and then on goes our first layer of cake with ganache in the middle. All right, next layer of cake and more ganache. That whipped white chocolate ganache is absolutely beautiful, but it's also sometimes a little bit soft on its initial lay. It will firm up with time, but I'm going to pop that cake into the fridge for 15 minutes to let those layers set so the top layers aren't trying to slide around as I'm ganaching the outside edges. So I'm happy that my cake is sort of semi-set. Now I'm going to put ganache all over the outside of it. And once again, you shouldn't really need a crumb coat, but if you feel that you do, just a really, really thin coat of ganache first, and then you can put a thicker coat over the top. Whenever I ganache a cake or frost a cake, you'll notice that I work my spatula back and forth. That's kind of pushing frosting into any little gaps, nooks and crannies that might have popped up or that I might have missed while I was ganaching between the layers, so I get a nice, flat, smooth outside edge. That's my initial coat, and now I'm going to put copious, delicious amounts of white ganache on top so I can't see any of that cake poking through. Once you've got your nice thick layer of ganache on, you can use something like, I'm going to use a scraper, but I often use a ruler for this, just to scrape back around the outside edges so you get like a nice sort of a flat, even surface. And then I'm going to use my offset spatula, and I'm just going to bring that frosting back so it's relatively nice and flat in the middle. Don't go to too much trouble on this top here because we're going to cover that in decorations, but around the outside edges, get it as neat as you can. For my decorations today, I've gone to the shops and I've bought pretty much everything white chocolate that I could find. I've got some thin blocks of chocolate. I've also got some decorations that we made ourselves in the chocolate decorations video. So this has just been made using white chocolate and bubble wrap, and there's a ton of cool ideas. I'll link to that video down below if you want to check it out. I've got some cookies and cream blocks, some plain white chocolate blocks, some white chocolate lint balls, some little white chocolate wafers, and some Raffaellos, as well as some Tim Tams. Pick whatever you like, but think about the amount of height you want to add to your cake. First up, I've got my chocolate at room temperature, so it's not just out of the fridge. I'm going to take a sharp knife and I'm going to cut diagonally. So I'm just going to rock the knife back and forth. One broke, but the other one is a beautiful long triangular shard of chocolate. And I want to form just a bit of a guide hole. This is going to go relatively close to the back, but not right along that back edge. It needs a bit of cake to hold it in place so it doesn't drag back and pull a hole in the cake. And then in goes my big, proud triangle of chocolate, and that's going to be my tallest point. Now I'm going to take one of my large pieces of like my bubble wrappy or my honeycomby looking chocolate, and I'm just going to snap that off roughly the size that I want it. So I want it a little smaller and kind of coming out on the opposite angle, and in it goes. I didn't carve a guide hole for that because it's quite thick at the bottom, so I'm not trying to get a thin point in there. Some of our cookies and cream bars. I'm going to cut down and make some nice little triangle shards. I love these just for breaking up the white a little bit. It's still definitely white, but it's just adding a bit of variation with those little kind of flecks of cookie in there. Some Tim Tam cookies, and I'm kind of cutting everything a little bit triangular, but I'm going to mix that up with some other round shapes, like now with our little cylindrical wafer straws. So a lot of the decoration of this is going to be by eye, but just have a look at any gaps. Don't feel the need to overcrowd it, but likewise, make sure you get all your favorites on there. A lot of height gives this that absolute wow factor, filling in the gaps, and I even cut in half some of my little lint balls so that I've got just a peak of pink showing through to tie in with my cake board. I've seen this style of cake everywhere, and there is nothing about this cake that a white chocolate fan's not gonna love. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do for 2 new videos every week. As always guys, thanks very much for tuning in to My Cupcake Addiction.